They say the truth hurts, the truth hurts, so you about to feel pain, and I gotta do work. God said I gotta do work, cause it's off with the name, savage truth, savage truth, it's the savage truth, the savage truth, the savage.
But there's this idea, like a lot of people, you talk about Kobe Bryant, you talk about that Mamba mindset, right? You talk about LeBron, you talk about these high performing athletes. And a lot of people, when it comes to purpose, they get lost in their mindsets. So they want to know, like, what's the mindset of someone who's great, right? And so it's all about mindset. And I think the world gets stuck on this mindset thing, which I think there's some stuff in there that's important. But mindset is ultimately rooted to perspective. And it's how you see yourself, and it's how you see the world around you. And you have this incredible perspective over your own self, which we'll call, for easy language, we'll call right now identity, right? Like you have this healthy perspective of who you are, that you're fully loved and you're fully free to be everything God's created you to be. And so there's this perspective. So my question is, when I listen to all of that you just said, which is gold, I hope you listeners are leaned in right now. There's so much gold in it. When I listen to all that, the question that comes to mind is, in your life, how did you get to that realization of your own identity? How did you come to this place of, okay, I got all these gifts, I got all these talents, that's cool, I'm trying this, I'm trying that, because there's like, that's the entrepreneur, right? We try stuff, we throw stuff on the wall. KJ52, I'll never forget. He was like, Pedro, just throw poop on the wall and see what sticks. Like, this is literally how success happens. And I was like, there's got to be better advice than that, getting off a plane somewhere in Atlanta or something. So for you, like, who helped the journey? Were there mentors? Were there books? Was there content? Was there a moment that sort of was a catalytic moment in going, this is who I am? And that ownership over your own God-given identity freed you from having to be anything else.
Yeah. And so I think there are probably a variety of moments, right? Just like what we talked about. I think there's a process to it where there's searching and rooting out, where I think we can more effectively find our identity as we start to carve away what other people have put into our hearts, whether that's society, family, right? Like, because our identity winds up being shaped by a lot of external factors, right? So we wind up being this like block of marble, right? And I forgot what artist it was. He was like, I bring the sculpture out of the marble. Like, I see it in there and I've just got to get it out.
I just free it.
And so I think a lot of us are kind of in that, right? We're encapsulated in people's expectations, the world's expectations. What does it mean to be masculine? What does it mean to be successful? What does it mean to be a Christian? And there's so many external things. So I think over time, right, first of all, the more that I got to know and understand God, and then the fact that like he loved me, it made me really want to be like, who am I then?
Wow.
Right? Because like he loves me, like his love is perfect, right? Like, and he loves me. So it's like, but why? Like, why would he love, like, what, you know what I mean? Like that doesn't make any sense, because we don't spend a lot of time and we're not encouraged to really do that evaluation to say like, who am I? Like, what am I good at? What value do I add to the world? Like, what is unique about me? Like, what is significant? Where can I have an impact? And so I think over time, especially as I got put into positions to lead, funny, like from a business perspective, I think some of those moments that were interesting to me were when people said stuff about me that it was hard for me to resonate, like just because of the bad image or identity I had of myself. Wow. So like for people to compliment me to this day still feels weird to me. Right? Despite like what I've accomplished and whatever, like it still feels weird to me for people to compliment me, because I've never seen myself as significant. I've never seen myself as unique or even like impactful. It took a long time for God to even like reconcile that in me. Like, this is what I put in you. So it was weird trying to find that inside, and so for me, it was a lot of people who spoke into my life at different phases that said stuff that could kind of resonate with me, but I never thought it about myself. Like, you know what I mean? Like the first person, right. And I can go back to I was working at a drive-through in McDonald's my freshman year of college. And I would interact with this lady. Her name was Miss Pickett, and she would she would drive her granddaughter to school because she was like the executive director of the local TV station. And so she would drop her granddaughter off at school and then she would go to work. But they came to McDonald's 5 days a week. And my schedule, I worked from 5 a.m. to 11. And this is probably a couple of months after I got saved, or the summer after I got saved. And so working in the morning, and then I would interact with her every day and just talk to her daughter. And no one had ever really said anything about the way that I speak, right? Like the way that it like grabs people's attention, or like no one had ever said that to me. And so she was in the drive-thru one day and she came through and she looked at me and she was like, please don't be offended by this question. But she said, why in God's name do you work here? And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, you are too special. You shouldn't be working here. She was like, if I can find you something else to do with like your voice and your mind and the way that you think, like, would you be willing to do it? And then I was like, you know what I mean? And that was weird to me because like I've always been an honor program and, you know, I had good grades, but no one ever really said anything like that to me. That like, wow. I'm taking money in the McDonald's drive-thru and I'm just talking to this lady for like 45 seconds, maybe a minute if the line's backed up. And like she saw that in me. And it was weird, but like at the time, and you know, I'm super zealous new Christian, right? I'm like, Lord, what are you trying to say to me right now through this vessel of yours, right? Like going to the cross. And then, you know, she set me up to go meet with the executive director of this organization. And he sat down and told me a problem he was having. And I laughed at him. And I'm like, I'm sorry, this probably isn't the way I should be interviewing for a job. But I'm like, you're telling me that you have a problem recruiting volunteers when I just came to your office and within 6 miles of your office are 6 universities with over 100,000 students. I said, college students are required to get volunteer hours. So are you just not looking? Like, how do you not have volunteers? Every fraternity is required to have a volunteer. Most athletes are required to volunteer. How do you not have volunteers for like 3 programs when there's like 150,000 college students within driving distance of your office? And he kind of laughed and looked at me. He was like, because no one's ever thought about that. And he was like, you do realize that, and it was weird to me because I'm like, what do you mean no one ever thought like that, right? So that was another moment to me, that was common sense. And he was like, but that's not common. So like within a short period of time, somebody was like, you think differently when it comes to solving problems. And then the lady was like, you have a way of speaking that gets people's attention and kind of draws them in. And then like, so it was stuff like that over time where somebody would say something that I don't even necessarily agree with. But then as I walk through it, God like reveals that to me, like, yes, like this is how I made you. And over time, it was not fighting against those moments, right? Not pushing back against them, but really trying to test, test it with the Spirit or just go to God and be like, okay. And then I think it expounded right in the same way. Like I enjoy teaching and like, I don't like, people think I don't like public speaking. I'm not an extrovert. People think I am. I'm actually not. Like, I'd rather read a book, right? And watch Seinfeld. Like if my ideal day is Seinfeld on in the background and me reading a book in my recliner in the sitting area in my room. Like, but there was, but there's times where I was called to lead. There were opportunities. And the funny thing is the job that I got, or the company I wound up starting when I met with the guy from that organization, was to provide training. It was to teach. So like, right. So it was not trying to respond, I guess, to whatever was popular or what may have been cool, but like, and I tell a lot of my mentees, but going deeper in what I know is uniquely me.
Wow.
Right. And so, because I'd announced on Ruslan's channel that I was doing a Zoom call with him, and I announced that I retired from Christian hip hop. And somebody saw it on a YouTube video, and a friend of mine hit me up. He was like, why did you retire? And I'm like, because I learned that me speaking is more effective than me rapping.
Wow. Like,
I can do it, right? But I can drop an entire album, and the amount of information people will pull from this conversation without them trying to interpret metaphors and similes and imagery and illustration. Like, I can just talk to people and give them that information. And my desire, right, like my heart is really to see people's thought process challenge, really to see people learn. So the most effective way for me to help people learn is not to rap, because people take too much subjective interpretation of creative things. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I would rather just talk. And so that's why when I started doing the podcast, I kind of shifted to that, but it's still teaching, right? It's still teaching and using my voice to explain something. So I think that, right, that there's ideas we have of ourselves, and some of those ideas are confirmed, but we need to be able to be receptive to people who see things that are in our blind spots, or that may be things that we can't see in ourselves because other people told us it wasn't possible, or we weren't, you know, or we weren't capable, right? So it's like learning to believe what people say, and then like understanding how to go deeper into who you naturally are. And again, not the type, but it kind of goes back to that, who are you, right?
Yeah.
That authentic, and going deeper in it. I see a lot of people that they'll jump to one trend, or right, that whatever the new wind is, right? Like your music changes every time, you know, a new artist drops and you want to compete, but just who are you? Yeah. Right. And then and then as people speak into that and you start to get that confirmation, or you start to get that insight from somebody that can see something in you that you can't, not to reject it or to dismiss it, but to test it and be like, oh, like I am kind of good at that naturally, because there's a lot of stuff we're working towards that we're trying to do, when at the same time, there's stuff that we can just naturally do because that's how God gifted us. Sure. So we can spend all of our, you know, and like, I know you were a drummer and you talked about baseball, like you love baseball. Like I used to play basketball so much. Like I wanted to be in the NBA so bad, but like I had to try so hard to be good, when there are things that I honestly, and you know, that people, not even me, that people say that I'm great at when I'm not trying. Yeah. So I'm like, I might need to focus on that stuff, right? Instead of like this willpower of discipline and, you know, you need practice, you need effort, right? You got quality, you want to drive for excellence, but there are some things that God specifically put in us for us to do. Yeah. And when we use those, it's like, it can be effortless, but so rewarding and productive at the same time.
Yeah, man, so much good stuff. For those of you listening on the podcast or not watching it on video, this is you can write books on this content. This is so good, man. So I appreciate you sharing. Some of the things that are like really resonating with me that I don't feel like a lot of people talk about in general, and I'm going to give you the mic on this one because I know you're going to just crush it. What do you do when you have, this is a lot of entrepreneurs, especially young entrepreneurs and young creatives. What do you do when all you can see is your giftedness, your talents, but you have people around you who every time you do something, because you're this guy, I was this guy, you're the jack of all trades. Like there's nothing you can't do. Like you can just do whatever. I'm sure you've heard that a couple times in your life. Yeah. Like what do you do when other people only see your gifts? And so then they try to build enterprise or suggest enterprise around your life. Like you should start this thing and you should do that thing. And so you spoke a little bit to this idea of like this deeper calling, this deeper why, culture would call like finding your why, which I think is actually, in my personal opinion, and I may or may not be writing a book about this right now, but I think it's the wrong place for us to start, is when we try to find our why. I think the thing that God looks at us trying to secure in us is who. He wants us to know who we are. And when we know who we are, we begin to understand our why, and then everything else sort of naturally unfolds. But what do you do when you're a person who's got like, you can produce records if you wanted to, you could write, you could tell stories, you could shoot film, there's just so many. I mean, I know you, like you are that guy. The moment I met you, dude, I knew you. I think you're talking to one of my mentors, CZ, Curtis Zachary.
Yeah. I talked to him this morning, actually. Me and him
good.
This morning.
He's a legend. And I was walking by and I'm just like listening to y'all's conversation. And I was like, 90% of this is like out of my league. Like you guys just talking. I was like, hey, you guys are out of my league. But I found people like CZ, Curtis Zachary, who look in my life and rather than go, well, Pedro, you're a good communicator, so you need to do this job. Yeah. How do you find friends? How do you find mentors that actually don't just look at your gifts and go, oh, you should take that talent and go work at U-Haul in the customer service department, or you should take that talent, but actually look at you more holistically and go, I think there's this deeper thing inside of you that is like the image of God, it's like the thumbprint of God in your life. How do you find friends that can help you uncover that thing?
I think
because LinkedIn, it might be hard to find them on LinkedIn. I'm just going to say, you know what I mean?
Like, or anywhere really, right? Because And one, I think it's such an underutilized gift. To be in, and me, it's funny, me and CZ talked about this, me and Curtis talked about this morning. It's such an underutilized gift being a leader of leaders.
Yeah.
Right. So when you have entrepreneurial enterprise kind of thing, and this is what God confirmed for me last year that my gift is to actually lead leaders, because leaders who have followers, right, like have a tendency to direct people based on a function. Yes. Right. And that function can be aligned with the gift. Like I have a follower who reaches out to me and said he loves music. So then I encourage them in music. Yep. Because you're not trying to evaluate when you're looking at a leader. It's like, who are you and what are you trying to accomplish? Mm-hmm. And then how do I help lead you as you lead in all of those areas? Yep. Right. So I think one, we have to stop leading with our gifts, because that's how most of us have learned to create relationships and network. Like when you meet somebody and be like, hey, man, I'm a videographer. Like, can you be mad when they only give you advice about films and videography? Wow. Like, that's what you introduce yourself as. So going back to what you said about what is we need to really understand what our identity is. Wow. Right. And you mentioned that earlier. So it's like, yeah, I'm a videographer. And so that's why like my best friend does film. He was like, I stopped calling myself a videographer. I'm a director. Because even the way people look at him is like, videographer, okay, can you give me some help on how to shoot stuff? But he was like, no, I'm a director. Like, and I actually told him, I said, you're not a director, you're actually a writer. You don't trust anybody to illustrate your own stories, so you're also directing them. Yeah. And he was like, yeah, you're probably right. But again, leader of leaders, I've known you long enough to know that's not all you are, right? So because of the fact that, especially with social media from like even the MySpace age, right, where we started checking off boxes for interest, we've become compartmentalized, right? Like we present a certain part of ourselves to people. So most of our relationships are based off of one of those tangents, right? Yes. I met you because I did music, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and that's the thing. So like, if I would have met you at the Brave Work conference and I would have been performing as a rapper, that would have been the context through which you knew me, but I was just there. Yeah. Nobody knew why I was there. They knew who I was there with. And then it was kind of like, okay, like who is this guy? Yeah. Right. Because you couldn't identify me based on any kind of gift, based on something I was doing. And a lot of us tend to meet now in those intersections. I met you at a concert. I met you at a speaking engagement. I met you at a church event. I met you at a networking event. And then we have a tendency to keep people there. So even as a friend, we need to learn how to start to try to understand people outside of, you know, like the one connection or that original relationship. We need to deepen our relationships, which is hard to do in our superficial social media world that we live in, right? So, you know, like, because I tell people all the time, you don't know me well if you don't know my son's middle name.
Wow, yeah, that's good.
Like my son's middle name has deep meaning to me. So if you don't know what his middle name is, then we're not that close, which is fine. But like someone who's speaking into my life, right, that wants to get to know me and help me develop, like you've got to understand that level of depth. And because of social media and we can kind of, I said we've become like voyeurs of people's lives instead of actually being involved in them. Yeah. So I see your wife, like even your wife and your son, like I can see your family on social media, even though I've never directly talked to your wife. And like I saw your son when we went to dinner that time. But then like I start to feel like I know your family when really I only know you. Right. Right. And so, so it doesn't create that like expanse. Right. So I think one, as every individual, we need to deepen our friendships, but we also have to stop leading with our gifts. And we have to lead with who we are, right? Like, this is who I am. And then if people want to once people start to get to know you, they know and understand your gifts, but we don't need to use that as the key to open that door, because often those doors those rooms have limited space. Yep. So it's like, you're a drummer. I know you as a drummer. If I need a drummer, I'll reach out to you. That's how I put your name in my phone. Right. Right. Because I've got people's name in my phone, rap fan. Yeah. Right. Like dude from Texas. You know what I mean? Like underneath the promoter. Promoter. Right. Because that's how I know you. Right. And then we don't get past a lot of those relationships to where we can have people that are speaking into our situations at a higher level. And honestly, everybody can't do it. So you have to find those, like you said, you've got CZ, you have to find those that have that that have that gift. And that's why the whole thing of seeking out mentors is what we, right? Not somebody whose YouTube video content that you watch, right? Because now we're consuming mentoring, but we don't have the actual relationship. We're consuming the information without the relationship. Wow. I think we need to bring mentoring back, right? Where you get relationships with people who are looking at you, to your point, holistically, and saying, okay, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a creative, this is my occupation, these are my gifts. Like, can you help me navigate some of this stuff? So when so like my mentees will bring stuff to me and I'm like, yeah, that sounds dope for your music career, but how does your wife feel about that?
Yes.
Right. So if I was only advising you as an artist, I would tell you to go all in and put all your money into this when I know, but if I know your financial situation, right, and how your wife is feeling about investments and things that you're about to do, the vacation or the home that you're trying to buy, then I'm obviously not going to advise you to sink all your money into trying to get on a Spotify playlist, right? Like, but we don't know each other that deeply because we don't really, I don't think we value that like mentoring relationship because we don't even see it at church, right? You have people who only know you at church as an attendee. They don't really know your family. They don't know your occupation. They don't know your gifts, so it's a lot of transactional relationships, and not holistic relationships. So we have to be intentional about holistic relationships and being vulnerable to that, right? Be like, look, man, I'd really like to connect with somebody that I can be open and honest with. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm trying to figure out who I am. I'm trying to, work on my calling and my purpose and all of that. So can I have somebody to bounce stuff off of instead of trying to find like where your value is in that relationship? Like, I'm the cool guy who knows this and you should know me. Like, no, sometimes you just need people to speak into your situation and into your life. And so, I mean, that's the one thing I would say. I think we need to get back to like intentional mentoring and not like these transactional relationships that I think social media exacerbated it, because now it's transactional and it's virtual.
Yep.
So that makes it even worse. Like, I think we need to get back to mentoring. So I would encourage entrepreneurs, right, to find people who don't even have to be in the same space or even necessarily creative, but somebody who will take the time to get to know you fully, holistically, and then try to provide you guidance and feedback, right? Who, and I mean, faith to me is the big thing, right? So someone who acknowledges and understands and aligns with your faith, and then somebody that can help you try to achieve your goals. And even if they're not creative or artistic, but somebody who can hold you accountable, somebody that can be a sounding board and just listen. That whole Titus, and Timothy, like the older men, doing stuff with the younger men. I think we've lost a lot of that. Yeah. Like, most of us don't have people older than us to speak to, right? Because like, where'd they all go? Like, where are all the 50-year-old guys for the people like me who are in their late 30s? Where are the guys in their late 30s for all the guys who are in their 20s and vice versa? Like, we've all become transactional. Most of our circles are people who have the same level of, life experience, and they're the same age as us, and we're all doing the same thing, where that mentoring was normally cross-generational on purpose, right? It was somebody either a generation or multiple generations ahead of you, so that some of their experience can inform you and have that information. So I think we need to bring that back, because we spend too much time around people who already think like us, who already act like us, and who haven't been through some of the things that we're approaching. So we need to reach out to some of those people that are, right? Like, I'm like right now, like, I'm looking for a mentor like in his 70s. Right. I need a mentor with grandkids. You know what I mean? Like, that's what like I want. So I've got somebody like in their 50s. I need somebody that's like 70 because I want to be able to have that generational knowledge.
Well, I'm not your guy then, man. I hate to tell you, I'm not there yet. I can't speed time up.